I think I finally found the perfect storage solution for my Mac. Let's talk about it. Welcome back to the channel. So being a content creator like me, it's a fun job, let's just be honest. A lot of companies call you up and they say, we want to send you some products, and full disclosure, they sent me this, all right? TerraMaster sent me this device. But sometimes they send you stuff that you don't even want. Sometimes they send you like stuff that's worth $10. And sometimes they actually send you just complete garbage. But in the case of TerraMaster, they didn't do that to me. They actually reached out to me and said, hey, we want to send you this DAS, direct attached storage device. And we want you just to take a look at it. I'm like, thinking in the background, I'm just like, I actually need one. So sure, send it out, send it out. I'll make a video because I love, just looking at technology. And on top of it, I need one right now for all my storage solutions being a content creator. So I thought this was the perfect video to make on this device because not only is it perfect for what I need, and I have a Mac and all that kind of stuff, but I think my viewers are gonna like this pretty much too. Okay, so this is, first of all, for starters, this is the TerraMaster D8 Hybrid. And we'll get into why it's a hybrid in a second there. That's kind of something that's important. They also call it the perfect solution for cold and hot storage. And you're going to say, what does that mean? And we're going to talk about that as well in this video. So first of all, though, let's just kind of get the easy stuff out of the way. This is a direct attached storage device. It's a DAS, D-A-S. It's not a NAS or not a network attached storage, but a DAS. What that basically means is you have a cable here, a USB-C, 10 gigabit per second, goes from the DAS into my computer over here. So it's kind of a direct connection into it. And the beauty of this is a couple things. I like things totally simple, all right? I've worked in a data center so many years where I saw people get these huge SANs and everything, all the software, they make tons of mistakes, they lose all their data. This is easy. And not only is it easy, I watched a couple other videos. Definitely stay for my whole video because I'm going to get into this, but I watched some other videos on this. And a lot of people are talking about some of the limitations of this device, but with macOS, there's not really any of those limitations, and I'm going to tell you why that's the case. So I think this is actually a really, really good device here, and that's what we're going to kind of talk about. Do you really need, a NAS, or is a DAS okay for you? Now, again, getting back to the simplicity of this, you don't need 10 gigabit networking, as far as your that kind of you just don't need a background in it. You don't need to buy 10 gigabit switches or anything like that. It just attaches directly into your computer, and that's a huge selling point for me. It's easy, right? Not only that, you don't have to worry about security as far as securing it from other people's, coming in on the network and stuff. So there's a lot of things that people don't know what they're doing, and they get into a lot of trouble that way. With this, as long as you're securing your computer here, this is directly attaching to it. Nobody can really get into it, and that's kind of a key selling point for me as well. All right, so now we're going to go through some of the specs of this, and I really want to show you why I think this shines with macOS when you're using it with macOS. And a lot of things, like in some of the reviews you're going to see in other channels, or you're going to read some reviews, they're going to kind of miss that point, and I want to kind of show you what that point is. So without further ado, we're going to get into the specs first, but then after that, definitely stay tuned because I'm going to show you on some of the screenshots here. I'm going to go into my screen and just show you how it works with macOS and why I think this could be one of the best storage solutions for your Mac. All right, so this again is the TerraMaster D8 Hybrid. And here's the page here. They call it the 8-bay hybrid RAID enclosure, ideal for hot and cold storage. 8 bays, I only see 4 in the front. Well, take a look at this. So there's 4 here, and these 4 in the front over here are easy to slide in and out. I'm going to show you some close-ups. You basically just click a button, it slides right out, slides back in. So these are easy kind of hot shoe SSD trays, I guess you call them, here in the front. And these take either 3.5 or 2.5 inch drives. So if you have like a SATA drive, SSD SATA, up to 500 megabytes per second, that'll go in here. Or even like a spinning drive, like a giant Western Digital spinning drive, like up to 24 terabytes can go in this thing as well. That's the front of it. Now the beauty of this thing is on the side of it. This side panel slides off over here. And inside of here, I'm going to show you some close-ups of that. You can put in 4 more M.2 drives. And this is why they call it the hybrid solution. It's got both M.2 here and the 3.5 inch on the front of it. So it's awesome. So you get totally 8 different drives that can go into here, which is pretty incredible. But we're going to get into why this even is better in a couple seconds here. But overall, I think that's just unique in itself, right? I have not seen too many that have the SSDs in M.2 form and this other form all in one. Also, take a look here. So it's saying this is actually not on Amazon right now, and I want to just go through this to make sure it's clear. It will be. So if you're watching this later, let me just take a step back. If you watch this in a few weeks after it launches, it could be on Amazon. I don't know. As of right now, though, as of the launch date, which I think is, what is it today? May 1st, all right? I'm talking on May 1st. It's on only, let me see here, Kickstarter. They're selling it, they said, so if you go to this, I'm gonna have some links in my video description, but it's, right now, the MRSP is $299, but they're gonna be selling it for $199 on Kickstarter, and it's saying it's up 33% off for people that get in early. So it's going to basically be May 7th is when it's going to kind of launch on Kickstarter, when you can actually buy it, I think, for the $199. And then it's going to go to sometime in June, and then that campaign ends. And then it's probably going to go out at that $299 price. But right away, you can get this for $199, it looks like, which is a pretty incredible deal here, and something that overall, I just, you can't complain with something like this. Now, the beauty of this thing, too, is it can hold up to 128 terabytes of storage. So I'm going to show you a graphic here. You say, how is that possible? Well, take a look at this. So it says the 4 drives in front. If you put in something like those giant Western Digitals, you can put in 4 times 24 terabyte drives in the front. Those are going to be the 5.5-inch drives. So you could have up to that much space there. And then over here, this takes up to four 8 terabyte M.2 drives. If you add all that up, it's going to be 128 terabytes total that you can throw in this system. Obviously, if you rate it and stuff like that, it might be different variations of that total space. But if you just need a ton of raw space that all have different drives and stuff, this thing's pretty incredible. I mean, 128 terabytes. Now, they call it the perfect cold and hot solution, or whatever you want to say, because they also say that it's 2+6, what do they call it? 2+6 RAID mode. And what does that mean? Well, this is something that, again, I'm going to take a step back. Some of the other channels out there said this was a limitation, but I'm going to fix that in a second. So make sure you stay tuned after I talk here. So what there is there's 4 of these, drive bays in the front. The very first 2 can be rated via hardware RAID, and we'll get into how that's done in a second. So the very first 2 can either be left alone, they can be RAID 0, RAID 1, or just JBOD, which is just a bunch of disks. That's totally fine. The other 2 on the front over here have to be basically single drives, unless you do something else. And then over here, these are all single M.2 drives. They're not like, there's no hardware RAID built into this to RAID those other things, except for the very first 2 SSDs or spinning drives on the front panel. So obviously, that looks like a limitation, but we're going to fix that later. But you can see that by taking this off, you can put in any variation, any mix of drives, and I have a whole bunch. I'll show you an array of the drives I'm using here. I have some that are similar, some that are not, but even so, you don't even need them to be similar drives. I mean, obviously, on the front, I basically did a JBOD on the very first 2 just to kind of fool around. I put in, I think, a 256 drive and a 5-something drive, and it adds those spaces up with JBOD, so I think I have like 700 and something, gigabytes of space on these first 2 drives because it's in JBOD. But you can just put in mix and match drives in here, and so far, all the drives I've tested and stuff, they all work fine. Now, if you're a Windows user, this does come with some software called Backup Buddy. It allows you to do incremental backups. But what they're saying here in the notes here is it says for Mac users, if you're just doing basic backups to this device, it's just best to use Time Machine. There's no specific software by TerraMaster. So just use Time Machine and it works perfectly. All right, so obviously with speed of the device, now you're limited to this is a 10 gigabit per second cable, so you're gonna get about 1,000 megabytes per second total throughput as far as how you're gonna reads and writes. That's really what it's capable of. It's not like a Thunderbolt enclosure, but it's fine for me. So what they're claiming is about 980 megabytes per second on the M.2s, and then on the front panels over here, you can get up to about 960 megabytes per second. If you were to put in like 2 SATA drives that are SSDs and RAID them in RAID 0, you might be able to get close to 1,000 megabytes per second because you're using RAID 0. Otherwise, they're just going to be the speed that they are, and that's usually up to 500, and 500 usually megabytes per second. And then if you put in like the large spinning drives like Western Digital Reds and stuff like that, obviously if you use RAID 0 on the panel on front, then you're going to get usually double the speed of those up to, whatever that comes out to. So if they're 250 megabytes per second, double that. So this is how this all works. But the capability, obviously with the limitation of the 10 gigabit per second, you're never going to get over 1,000. But I have tested the M.2s and I've gotten very close to 1,000. In the front are very close to what they're supposed to be also. So I've had no problems with speed here. And it's just a great device overall if you want some fast storage. All right, let's talk about RAID for a second. So this thing has, just the first 2 slots can go into hardware RAID that's on this device. But we're going to talk about how to fix that. So after we get through this, I'm going to show you that. So if you look on the very back here, there's like this little dial here. You can see it here. And you basically have to move this little pin, to wherever you want it to be, either RAID 0, RAID 1, single, or a JBOD. And then you basically, there's like a little reset button. And when the drives are in there, you reset it, and then basically it comes up as either RAID 1, RAID 0. It's very easy. I'm not going to give you the exact details that's in there, but that's how you do it. It's very simple. So down over here, though, you can see that JBOD, well, let me just say, single mode, basically, we'll start here. Single mode is basically, you get this, if you left it like that, all 4 drives would be separate. RAID 0 divides the data into smaller segments, distributes them across multiple hard drives, and then offers excellent, so if you do RAID 0, basically, it's going to almost double the speed. So if you have like a drive that's at 500, another drive that's at 500, you go to RAID 0, you're going to get closer to about 1,000 megabytes per second, but then you don't have any data integrity. So if one drive fails, the other one fails basically as well. And then you also have RAID 1. This is the one where you want to basically use if you want to mirror drive. So if you put in like one of those big 24 terabyte drives and you put another one next to it, Put it in RAID 1, it's basically mirroring that drive. So if one of the drives fails, you can pull that drive, put another one in, it's going to rebuild itself, and you don't lose any data. So that's the genius of that. It's kind of like backing itself up, but RAID's not really backup, but it still helps with that kind of stuff. So RAID 1 is really important here. Then there's something called JBOD, where it's basically just a bunch of disks. And what that means is you can put in 2 different disks in here, change it to JBOD in the back, and then if you have like a 256 drive and you have a 700 and some gigabyte drive, it just adds them together. Like that'll be a terabyte basically. So it's going to add, the space of those 2 drives together. The problem with that though is it's not really mirroring itself either there with JBOD. So if you lose one of them, you kind of lose your data. But there's reasons to do that. So you do that if you have a backup copy somewhere else. You just want to combine some drives to make a larger volume and stuff. But overall, I think RAID 1 is really where this goes, because they're calling it hot and cold storage, because they're saying put all of your important stuff. Well, actually, they're saying do all of your important work, maybe your video work on these M.2 drives or some fast SSDs on here, 2.5-inch drives. Then slide in some big 24 terabytes, 8 terabytes, whatever you want to put in here, spinning drives, and put them in RAID 1. And then after you're done with your work, move it over to the RAID configuration. So now you have a copy here, you have a copy here that's in RAID, and then that RAID is also mirrored, so you have kind of another copy in there just in case. And that's kind of what this thing's really good for overall. And you can see on their page here, it says less stress, more bliss, push and lock structure. So the whole thing kind of, like I said, everything comes out, like the drives come out, this panel slides off. You do have to screw some of the things in here and there, but overall it's just really easy to get in and out of drives. But you don't, it's hard to make a mistake and pull them accidentally, which you don't want to do in a RAID configuration. But overall, it works really well. Now this thing's also made out of plastic, but I think it's very elegant. On the back, it's got a giant fan here. You can see it here. Very quiet, so it only spins up in certain circumstances. It goes into idle sometimes, but I mean, I don't really hear it that much at all, so it's a very quiet fan, and it does cool it really well. Beyond that, I haven't had any problems with anything overheating in this device at all. I think the airflow is really good on it. And overall, I'll show you some close-ups of the inside. There's not a lot of stuff in the inside of these things. It's just space for the drives and stuff. The fan's in the back. The fan will spin to cool it if it gets too hot. I think this thing will pull like 30 or 40 watts somewhere in there if you have like a lot of drives in it and stuff. But it doesn't use a ton of power. It doesn't make my lights flicker or anything like that. So overall, this thing's been just a joy to work with. And then finally, I'm just going to put up some specs on the screen here. So if you guys want to go ahead and just pause the screen, you can definitely take a look at the whole specs here. It's going to give you the dimensions and power supply and all this other file systems and speeds and everything. So definitely do that. And then there's the first page, so you can pause it if you want to. And then I'll go ahead and do the second page right now so you can get the rest of it there. And then, obviously for your own knowledge, if you want to take a look at that, I'll have a link also. You can go to their website and check that out as well. So why is this the perfect solution for a Mac, all right? And like I said, I read some reviews. People say, well, the limitation is why does it only have 2 bays for hardware RAID, right? The other ones are just kind of single disks. Well, the beauty of macOS is you can change that instantly. So look at my screen over here. So I have, just a full disclosure, on the hardware RAID, I just did a JBOD. I called it JBOD disk. So I have 2 disks in here. One's 250, one's 500. And now this thing is like 750 megabytes or gigabytes as far as size because it adds them together. And I was just fooling around. But then in the front over here, I have 2 more of these Vulkan drives right here. These are 480 gigabyte SSDs. And then on the side, I only have 2 M.2s in here right now. And one of them is a Crucial 500 gigabyte and another one's a Lars 2 terabyte. So I have different size drives over here, but that are the M.2 drives. But the beauty of this thing is if you go into macOS, and let me just do this really quickly. So if you go in over here and you go into Other, and you go into, let me just see here, Disk Utility right here. Once you're in Disk Utility, you have to be very careful here. And I'm not going to be responsible if you break your system, but it's super easy. It takes like literally 2 seconds to do. So when I'm in here, I can go into macOS, and then I go up to File up here, see it? And then I go to RAID Assistant right there. So what I can do is I can create on any of these other drives, even the M.2 drives, I can make a RAID 0, a RAID 1, or even a JBOD. Just like the hardware, I can do it with the software and built into macOS. So for instance, these other 2 drives over here, which are on the front bay here, they're 2 500 gigabyte 2.5-inch SSDs. Let me just go ahead and mirror those as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click mirror right here, see it right here. I'm going to click next. This is the important part. I know what they are. You have to make sure you don't pick your Apple drive here. You're going to reformat it or something. You need to pick the drives that you want. So I know what these are called over here. I actually called them right here. These 2 different drives. It's called, they're both 480 gigabytes, you can see there, but I'm just going to select both of those. I know those are in the slot 3 and 4. And again, these slots are not rated by this device. There's no hardware RAID built in. I'm going to use macOS built-in RAID for those 2. So I went ahead and I selected those 2 drives. I'm going to click next here. Take a look at this. Then you're going to go ahead and just type this. I'm going to say this is going to be RAID 1, I'm sorry. And I'm just going to call it SSD. So I know that that's called. I'm going to keep it, let me just go to APFS there. Then I'm going to do RAID, and you can see it's going to be 480 gigs because it's going to basically mirror those two drives. So obviously if one fails, you pull it, you put the other one back in. And then the chunk size over here, I'm going to make it 256. I usually make it as big as I can there. Long story short, you can read about it here, but I usually make it either 128 or 256 there. Then I'm going to just click next and watch what happens. I'm going to click next. It's going to say create right here. I'm going to create it. So over here, look what happens on my screen. It took those first two disks, the Vulkan 1 and the Vulkan 2 disks, and now they're gone, right? You can see it's doing something over here. Give it a second here. It's going to take a couple seconds. And it's still thinking about it. It's mounting now. Now what it did is it just said created successfully, done. All right. So over here, look at this. Now over here, I have something called RAID 1. That's what I wanted to call it. This is going to be, let me go in here. If I go to get info on this drive, let's just see it's still only 479 gigabytes because it's one of them. But now it's a RAIDed configuration. So those two drives now are in RAID 1, and macOS is doing that. This device isn't, but macOS is. But the cool thing is this device, meaning you can use hardware RAID for the first two, you can then use software RAID like I just did for these other two, or for even the M.2 drives, you can do the same thing. You can put them in RAID 0, RAID 1, JBOD. You wouldn't really want to do RAID 0 on the M.2s because you're not going to get any faster because it's only capable of up to 1,000 megabytes per second. But over here, if I did, let me think, RAID 0 on these drives, it's going to be faster because they're going to be combining, basically doubling the speed of them. So overall, this is an ingenious thing with macOS. You can see in here now, if I click on RAID, this is the RAID 1 I just configured, and you can see the two drives are right in here. They're both kind of connected to this RAID configuration. If I want to delete the RAID, I just click delete RAID right there, and then I just reformat the drives again in here, and they're back to normal single drives. Obviously though, if something fails in here, like one of the drives fails, I would pull the bad drive, pop in a new one, it's going to rebuild itself, and I wouldn't lose any data. All right, so at the end of the day, this is why I love this thing, because number one, it can hold up to the 124 terabytes of space or whatever it comes out to, crazy, right? It's got the two channels or two different disks here. You can do hardware RAID. It's super easy. There's not, a huge learning curve at all. But then on the other drives, you can either leave them standalone and you can use them kind of as your main stuff and then back up to your other stuff, or you can actually just go ahead and use the macOS built-in RAID and even RAID those if you wanted to. Now I've tested this over, I've had it for about 2 weeks now, so I'm not doing a full product review. I have no idea how this thing is going to go long-term and all that kind of stuff built into, reviewing products. But from my initial stance of using this, needing, I want a lot of storage. I want it to be fairly fast, up to the 1,000 megabytes per second. I want RAID in some cases, which the first two are hardware RAID, perfect. And if I want any other RAID, I can go ahead and RAID it myself using macOS, and just what I just showed you with the RAID Assistant. It's a super ingenious system here. And, of course, you can get like a little SSD drive and something and, 2 terabytes there. But if you're doing like large backups for video stuff, it's just something that, obviously just makes sense here because you can put as much storage, change it out whenever you want to, put one off site, bring it back and put another drive in and just keep using it until you have everything backed up to your heart's content. All right, so I'm going to check out here. I make videos maybe 3 a week and I make them on all different technology, but I'm more of a Mac channel. We'll talk to you on the next one. Peace.